Call to order work session, Goodyear City Council, 14 May 2007. Missing one council member. She'll be here, right?
I think so, because you didn't tell me you didn't hear anything.
And so we'll expect Council Member Osborne any minute now. We have two items on our agenda. First is the budget, and with Larry Lang, and then the Ken Kennedy with the update on the CIP. So, Larry, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Tonight will be the briefest budget presentation you'll see from me, and that's part of what this was scheduled for, was mainly council input on the budget, what input you'd like, or what comments you may have, changes that the council may propose, and so forth. I have passed out one schedule for you this evening, of which a copy is up on Elmo. This is changes to the overall budget since all of the information that we gave you in your notebook. Very simply, what those changes are is this carryover column of $68.5 million. What that represents is capital improvement projects that we're expecting at the end of the year to be carried forward to next year's budget. Now, that calculation was actually done a couple of months ago, so that number may be lower than this, but we wanted a high-end number to match budget law requirements. This number will be put in the budget office so that we can monitor to make sure the same dollar does not get spent twice. There's a small change, about $145,000 in the number I'm pointing at, which is the beginning fund balance. And that's from the reports that we gave you. And what that change was a change to reflect additional equipment that was expected to be spent this year and was not spent. Very briefly, what the columns in that I have in this presentation, I tried to just summarize the revenues and the expenditures in the budget. The first column, as you recall, was the new money portion of the budget that we focused a lot of our discussions on. The next column is the fund balance, the money that we expect at the end of the year from normal operations available to carry over and how that rolled into the budget. The next number is the annexation. That is money coming in and going out relating to the Sonoran Valley annexation. We wanted that money tracked separately as we went through the process. Next column is the special projects, which includes the stadium, the improvement district up in the McDowell corridor that I refer to as the West Core Improvement District, as well as a $40 million allowance for another improvement district if one were to arise. And the final is a carryover number, which is simply projects that were not completed. With that having been said, that is all of my comments. The real purpose of tonight's meeting is to get your input on the proposed budget. If there are items the City Council wants changes or questions, it's really there. Once we're done with that, we'll roll over to the capital improvements plan portion of the agenda.
Just a quick reminder, what's the next presentation on the budget?
Okay, thank you. The schedule on the budget after this, the next regular council meeting, May 29th, because of the holiday, will be adoption of the tentative budget. So we really would like all of your input tonight on the budget. Then following that, June 25th will be adoption of the final budget. July 9th will be the adoption of the property tax levy. The public hearing will be held on June 25th to meet the truth in taxation and the budget law requirements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll start over here.
No, I just have the same story I had the last time. I still would like to see us hire more police officers and have that in the budget this time. I don't know if that's been considered since the last time I spoke.
The answer would be considered, but it hasn't been changed. If the City Council requests that, I did discuss that with one member of the council specifically. Our recommendation is that funding would come out of the money that we had talked about in the city manager's budget that we set aside to cover 4 major areas: the matrix assessment, the MSS technology, the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee, and the employment corridor issues. The estimate of that effective July 1st, including all capital costs, was approximately $850,000, and that would be just a remove of that money if that's what the council wishes.
Well, I would like to make a plea to my fellow council people and see if you would consider thinking about adding a few more spots to the police department.
Why don't we get back to that?
Okay.
We'll go around, and in fact, you can talk to that as we go around. Councilmember Osborne, on, broad subject and this.
Okay. I was that one council member that spoke to Larry about the police, and I would like to see those 6 put in there and back into the budget, finding somehow the financing to get through it. And I think he spoke of where it could be funded. As for other things, I think that things are looking good. That was my biggest concern, quite frankly, was the police force.
Okay.
Where is that for 6 bodies?
That's for 6 bodies, that number is, yes.
Did you say 4 or 6? I thought
Well, I thought it was 4 more, wasn't it? It
4
was
to
8, and they asked
4
for 12.
and 2.
And so I thought it was additional 4.
The breakdown in that they had requested was 4, as I recall, 4 patrolmen and 2 detectives for a total of 6. If the city council wants to do a number different than that, I'm not telling you you can't.
I do, but I'm sorry, I don't have that before me. And I just thought I know that the council didn't see these numbers, but I asked for a specific number of what the police department went in for originally, not what came out in our budget book that night. So that's what I was working off of, saying that I wanted to give them more positions.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, without the book in front of me, I couldn't state unless the police chief could address that.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Lord, we could provide you with the information from our executive summary for our budget requests, and that's probably answering that question for you.
Okay.
Councilmember Antoniak?
Good for now. I support the police, the efforts in the police department, but good.
4 or 6? There.
Assuming I'm going to read the same stuff that Georgia just read, it sounds like we're going to come to that conclusion. But it seems to make
I thought it
sense to me.
was 4 additional, that's what I think it was.
Yeah. Sorry, I apologize. I did get up and
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Antoniak, I apologize. In our executive summary, we asked for 12 police officers, the original request. And in looking at the part that didn't get funded that you all have, it shows a street crimes unit, and that's made up of 6 total personnel, 4 police officers plus 2 detectives, and that was for the property crime.
So you needed
addressing.
6 more or 4 more, was it?
Well, we'd asked for initially 3 detectives, and we're given the 2 detectives that were approved. It's in the budget document that you have. So it would be 4 detectives, or I'm sorry, 4 officers, 1 detective.
So that's 5 positions, okay.
5 position?
5.
Yes, and that would be in the executive summary.
Okay, thank you.
Seems like a happy medium between 4 and 6.
Do you have anything else?
Just with all that going on, I guess what I was thinking, Chief, this is Chief, with the additional ones, you actually got pretty much all you wanted except for the street crimes unit. Is that so?
Well, the original request for police officers was 12 police officers. That would allow us to add 2 per each of our 6 squads.
Okay.
With the approval of 8, we were still down to 4 police officers positions.
Okay.
To make that, to add 2 to each squad for the visibility purposes and shrinking down some of the patrol areas.
Okay. I understand. I was just trying to see how you were going to divvy them out, because I didn't know if you were going to put them all in one group at one time or if you were spreading them out amongst the rest of the squads. Or maybe you don't
Mayor
know?
Kavanaugh, Councilmember Holland, a few weeks ago I mentioned the ability to hire all at once. So we don't think that we're going to see that impact in July of all of those police officers in the influx. We think that it's probably going to take till most likely December to hire everybody. And then we have a period of about 9 months from training, and that again is if everything goes well. They've got 7 months in the academy and then 2 months of field training to follow that before they're solo peace officers. So yeah, it's going to take some time.
Okay,
So
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize, Mr. Mayor. One question that I did have that I wasn't exactly sure where to go to, and I would think that Sean Bradford's the person. Last week, we discussed that water management system or whatever we were going through, and at the very back of that book, and unfortunately I have it with me, it showed a breakdown of the cities and their funding towards water. There was a chart, and it showed all the cities, and we had like $5,000 towards our budget, where everybody else was $122,000, $50,000. Gosh, this is terrible. I don't have that book. Do you know what I'm talking about at the back of the?
Mayor, Councilmember Osborne, we talked about water conservation.
It was funding for water conservation within our own budget, and ours was extremely low compared to all the other municipalities shown.
As it relates to,
Has that changed in our budget?
Well, as it relates to our funding, there's associations that we're members of that promote conservation, so there's an indirect benefit. AMWAR has some conservation efforts. Water Use It Wisely has some conservation efforts that Water Resources Department in the City of Goodyear is a member of. As it relates to specific line items, I don't have the report with me, I'm sorry.
Okay, I apologize. I just remember that I had written on there, ask a budget question, because ours was so low in the funding, and that's what I didn't.
I'd be happy to discuss that with you tomorrow if you'd like.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry.
Anything else? Councilmember Souza?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm always concerned about the safety of the city and safety of members of our police department, and certainly I would back the efforts to acquire an additional 5 or 6 police officers in our staff for safety reasons, not only for the citizens of this city, but also for the backup that we need, and it's quite evident of our police officers when they are on call and are assigned to a duty that requires backup. I think the more police officers we have on the street, the better off we're going to be. And certainly, I always felt that the expansion of the police department is welfare of not only the citizens of the city, but the police department itself. My question 2 weeks ago on budget was my concern that we adequately showed that in this budget process that the monies that indicated that was going for the Sonoran Valley, that they were explicit, that these are being paid for and reimbursed by the developer, and that these are not outgoing from the general fund or from any tax source that the city has in this operation from its beginning. You feel that your explanation earlier satisfied that question that I had?
Yes, sir. The schedule up here on Elmo shows for the annexation that, and actually the calculation started on the expenditure side, that approximately $1.9 million would be spent on operating expenditures in that area. Approximately $585,000 would be spent for equipment, and that under the terms of the agreement, the reimbursements for the developer would therefore be approximately $2.8 million. You'll notice that shows a $225,000 surplus at the bottom. That surplus represents the 5% or the 25% overhead factor built into the agreement. If I were to flow this through like an accountant, I would show that $225,000 then rolling over to this column, because that's more appropriately where that money will be spent. But here, I left it here to clearly show you that we're taking in our expenditures and we're billing more than that to cover the terms of the agreement.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'm pretty much satisfied with the budget as it is. On the police side of this, my expectations would be the justification of how you're going to use these additional 5 people or 6 people, whatever you need, because we, unless it's going to add enough people on the street, enough police on the street, you can add double the number of police on the street, and you're still going to have a lot of blank area where crime is going to be committed, if you want to call this crime. And most of the crime we have in this city is mostly burglaries and break-ins and that kind of thing, speeding. Those are the things. I'd like to see a justification for the additional police. What I'm seeing most cities doing now, if they're going to an education system, I'm seeing this in many places where there are signs put up in the city, there's signs put up on the highway. If you see tailgaters, or if you see DUI, call this number. And I know that they can't make any arrests with that, but people don't like to have them, they don't like to be turned in, because all they can do is get a reprimand, probably on the phone, or by mail, because that's what they do. But I think it's embarrassing enough, and what it does is it brings the community into this so that the community becomes a part of law enforcement. Now, I don't know if that works here, maybe it doesn't, and maybe you've tried that, I don't know, but I see in other cities in other states, they seem to be very pleased with that kind of thing, and I notice just talking to the people, they feel very good about this. They have a part in policing their city and watching their city, neighborhood watches and that sort of thing along with that. But I'd like to see more of the education side, where you get out to the communities and show them and have some kind of notification bulletins some way, so that people could at least feel like somebody's watching me, so I better be careful. And I think it works. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. But I'd like to see more justification for the additional police, and if we need it, fine, yes. That's it.
Thank you. Chief Brown, would 5 additional officers affect your overtime at all?
Mayor Kavanaugh, regarding overtime, that's a very good question, and we could look at the reduction of overtime. But it's important to remember, too, that it's a 24-hour operation when 2/3 of our staff does not work the regular Monday through Friday schedules that the rest of the city would be working. So in considering that, when the court time, when they're required to appear in court, that's all on an overtime basis. We have looked at some measures of maybe adjusting those staff out that have had court. And what we do is we create other shortfalls somewhere else. So we're filling positions on overtime basis, so we're really not gaining anything. But as far as impacting the overtime, if you're looking at a substantial decrease in that, again, we won't experience all of those officers until probably next fiscal year, to where they're all hired and trained and on duty. It does give us a leg up, but as far as addressing the overtime and lowering that overtime, that's really hard to say, and I'm going to probably say no, it would not substantially impact overtime.
Okay, thank you. Larry, is there money for 5? And where's it coming from?
The money, my recommendation would be that we fund it out of the $2.4 million line item that we included in the city manager's budget for implementation of the matrix assessment for several items. The MSS study, it was the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee, and that's the link here. And then it was the development corridor. And yes, that would still leave $1.5 million for implementation of the matrix assessment after this transaction, if you did 6.
So we're talking, what, $900,000?
It's about $850,000 for approximate numbers. That includes one-time costs, such as a police car as needed, how many were requested, and so forth. Now, admittingly, as Chief Brown referred to, they will be here for less than a year. We will not spend the salaries for the full year. As a budget practice that we've had over the years, we like to budget that position for the full year so that the following year that does not become an increase built into the budget that hasn't been anticipated.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
after the discussion is completed, I'd like to toss up a couple more points.
I think it's, if you have,
We do have two officers, is it the DROP program? What is the program that, I don't remember the name of it. I see, defer, anyway, in 2 years, we're gonna lose two of them. I just saw that somewhere on my,
Mayor, Councilmember Lord, we have one officer in the deferred retirement option plan, and he's just coming up on year 1, so he's got 4 more years.
we just got something in our information, it had two in there that were gonna come up in the next 2 years. So that's what I was.
Okay, well, okay. I didn't know that, so, okay. Yeah, but the drop program is for a 5-year period.
Such that they announce that they're leaving.
Right. After 5 years, they have to go.
I just misread that then. I'm thinking that 2 years from now, they're out of here. All right, thank you.
Mr. Cleveland?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I think that as we pursue this discussion, it's important for us to broaden our discussion a little bit, and that is that with each of the police officers, depending on what function they play, it can very well have a ripple effect through the balance of the city's criminal justice system. What I'm talking about is if you have a motor officer, that's going to generate a huge increase in citations versus a patrolman who is also out handling calls for service to a property crime, what have you. The second piece is the prosecution office is also going to be impacted. What I would offer up, if you wish to move forward in this direction, and we would bring back some further justification on all 3 pieces, the police, the courts, and the prosecution, as to what the implications of these numbers are. Now, as Larry mentioned, and this is kind of, you don't like doing it this way, but here's a pot of money, go and figure out a way to use within this limit to cover all 3 of these needs, and recognizing that the police officers are 6 months in the hiring process, unless they're certified, which helps speed up the process, that the prosecution and the court side of it has a 4th leg, and that's in this building right here. We're already remodeling space here just for the bodies that are here, so we have a space need. So we have a couple more pieces to look at if we move forward with this this evening or at the end of May. So my suggestion, if you do want to move forward, what we would do is put together all the information and a possible solution and work within, let's say, roughly the $800,000 to solve all 3 problems. And it may be sequentialed out that when you're actually hiring and you got them into training, that's in January, so you're not spending all the money. The ripple effect, as Larry would say, is next July it catches us, because then you have to budget 12 months for each of those positions. We can bring a little more information and maybe show you how this can work.
Councilmember Antonio?
Just a follow-up here. Are we not we're budgeting for 12 months for those individuals regardless of whether they come in now or in April of next year, is what I thought
Mr. Mayor,
I heard from Larry,
Councilman.
and I just heard that it's going to bite us come next July. So,
No,
which is it?
what I was suggesting is that you may need 3 more bodies on top of the
Oh, okay. So
discussion
right,
of
we may
6.
get those folks, but the ripple effect may not happen. Would the ripple effect not happen until next July? Is that what you were
Right.
articulating?
Your discussion has been based upon 5 bodies, 4 police officers, 1 detective to help the street crime unit, which I'm
No, it's fine.
which I'm very supportive of. The issue is that we have a secondary issue, and that is the prosecution's office
and the court will have some ripple effect in that, where those cases are processed through here. And we need to account for that in this deliberation. So if you have a delay in the initial hiring just because of process dictates it, where you can't hire everybody until December, you got 6 months worth of money, where you could in fact start your court elements, your prosecution elements much sooner. And at the end, next July is when it catches up, because what you're having to do in that scenario is pick up the 6 months that wasn't financed if you're using it for other purposes under this strategy. Otherwise, you're basically talking in excess of $1 million to do it under our traditional model, which is to budget for 12 months of a position.
What happens to, just a thought as I'm sitting here listening, what happens to unused monies that are allocated for personnel at the end of the fiscal year?
I'll answer that. This $30 million that's in this fund balance column would include that. We generally like to put that money towards this $8 million, towards the capital improvement plan to the extent practical. Because when it comes in as cash that you can only spend once. Now, we adjust the budgets, of course, as we go forward.
Would it be appropriate if departments did or didn't have, if they did have monies that were left over, would it be appropriate to spend those on special projects for those departments, i.e. if the city manager had money left over? We just talked about taking $1 million out of the 2.5, but rather than robbing Peter to pay Paul, would it be appropriate for us to look at this and say, you know, we've got $1 million left over, let's keep the 2.5 in the manager's budget for the matrix and MSS and all of that kind of stuff, but I guess maybe you've already done that. You've already gone through that practice.
For this next year, we've already done that.
Yeah, you've already gone through that. Okay. Sorry, I just answered my own question as I was articulating out loud, which is not an unusual thing for me to do on the dais. So with that there, I have a couple of questions. Where in this, or did we address? I brought up the idea of longer bond periods, and you got to. Again, excuse me, I got in late on a flight last night, and I haven't read some of the stuff, admittedly, tonight. But did we address longer bond periods, and are we going to see that in the CIP? Okay.
We'll see that in the CIP. If you look at the numbers that Ken Kennedy has for the 5-year capital improvement plan, it actually assumes more aggressive and longer bond periods for this and the next 4 years. Obviously, that brings up a very good point there, that's based on today's market conditions. As we go through years 2 through 5, those market conditions can very well change.
Sure. That
would fluctuate those amounts.
Sure.
But yes, we have, based on that, we're assuming a 20-year bond issue.
Okay.
For the GO bond, and in fact, we have our financial advisor and bond counsel working on that. May 29th, we're going to bring you a resolution to go forward with that.
Now, but are we being very specific in that the sense? I mean, we went through this practice before I was on this dais, and we bought a fire truck on a 20-year bond cycle, and it didn't make sense, or 15-year, whatever it was. But we might still be paying for that fire truck today, and it's not in service, or maybe it is. But are we being very specific about where we're increasing the bond time? Are you doing that?
We're doing this based on the overall financial resources, and we're really basing it on how we're paying the bonds back, which is a revenue base as opposed to the specific assets. So that what it does is the 20 years out lowers our payment now, increases it for years 16 through 20, but with that allows us better leverage earlier on in the bond, but we're looking at our ability to pay it back, which is what the bond markets look at.
It's not a balloon, but it's.
But for your benefit, most of the items funded through the bonds are infrastructure, either water, sewer, streets, those types, or buildings. Not a lot of equipment gets funded through the bond programs.
Okay.
And typically in that scenario, then the life cycle is what? Is it appropriate for 20, 25?
The life cycle of the assets that we finance, I would say overall average life cycle in those assets would probably be 35 to 50 years if you were to average the whole portfolio.
Okay. The last question, last year again, was having a conversation about this today, so I can't recall if I saw this in the budget, but last year when we entered down the path of all the higher education stuff, I remember specifically calling out a line item in the mayor or manager's budget. Did we do that again next year, assuming we're going to sustain that protocol and that?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Harvey?
Harvey, we're sort of having a slow year, certainly in residential, and it's hard to tell if that's going to continue. And I think our commercials being slowed down a bit too from the standpoint of implementation. I guess, Larry, maybe this is in your bailiwick too. What's it look like? I mean, what's your projection on residential permits, and how dependent is the budget on those estimates?
I'll let Larry go with the crystal ball. Well, the trend in the last few months is the residential is still down around 40%. However, the commercial and industrial sectors are up about 20%. So we are, it's not quite revenue neutral. I think Larry can expand on the revenue neutral. In terms of the future, there are a lot of properties still being entitled today in anticipation of the coming out of this, I guess, so-called building somewhat recession. What I'm hearing from experts, maybe a year from now, possibly, or a little less than a year from now, is what I'm hearing.
But what's the budget projection based on, then? Let me ask it that way, for permits? For residential, I think commercial's going to slow down here too.
We have combined those in the residential and the commercial side, and as I recall, those total numbers were in the area of about $13 million, and we were expecting that number to remain relatively constant because the commercial are considerably higher dollar, and that we were gaining on the commercial, but assuming a loss in residential. As we as a staff, as a budget staff, have discussed the impacts of the slowdown, clearly the building permit fees would be a number, but in the grand scheme of our budget, that if it were to slow down, it might only be a couple, 3 million, and that would be hard to see this number lower. Where we're most concerned and want to monitor the closest is the construction sales tax number, where we have estimated actually an increase in that number up to about 22 million from the current pace, which is about 20 million. And that's a number we're constantly watching, but all of that money flows down to capital and one-time type expenditures. So I guess that's where it's at, but it's approximately $13 million is that estimate for those types that include engineering as well as building and safety, building permit fees.
Larry, in the past, we've estimated 16% annual growth in revenue in the permit sector. What is the estimate for next year? Percentage?
Zero, right? Yeah. We projected zero growth for the permits and fees for this year.
Versus a historic 16?
Yes.
So this should be fairly conservative then?
Yes.
Okay. Further discussion? Do we need a motion or?
I would,
And that's right.
I would really like some direction if we can bring back a tentative budget that you have with direction. I've heard a majority wanting police officers. Stephen kind of raised the issues of trickle through there. we can bring it back and report to you in the tentative budget. We can bring the tentative budget back this way and keep asking the question. I'm just not sure what council would like of us.
That doesn't really change the number, it changes the process.
It changes position authorization, it changes where we put the line items.
Okay,
So it changes a lot in the mechanics.
mechanics of it.
The total number really can't change unless we have new revenues coming in. There's only so many dollars to spend.
So,
Laurie asked the question in this fashion. The tentative budget approval is for the purpose of the total dollar amount maximum?
Well, I think legally, it's for the total dollar amount maximum. That is correct. The real challenge is that as we go forward with July 1st being when we start our fiscal year and the budget being the basis upon which we proceed, I really encourage that our tentative budget as we adopt it is what we intend that budget to look like. However, if based on the information you feel you don't have enough information on this specific issue and you need us to bring back additional information such as what Mr. Cleveland referred to, we can do that, but we'll have to either address it in the final budget a month later or in a budget modification that couldn't happen until probably August, at the council's wish on
well,
that.
that doesn't make me change my mind at all on the number of positions that I requested. So that doesn't change in my mind. How you get there is up to you. That's your job. And if it's that process that the manager has talked about, then so be it. But the end result is we got that number.
Okay? And that number is
I believe it was 5 or 6, was it?
5.
5, was it?
5?
5 was the number? I just want to make sure.
But the city manager brought up a point that there's 5 police officers causes 2 to 3 additional in this building. So it goes from 800,000 to $1,000,001 or something like that.
The only problem is, I know and I understand the cost, and it is pretty high. But look what's happening to our city. Look at the number of people that are coming in. Look at even though construction has lessened somewhat, look at the number of businesses alone. Did you read on your email the number of businesses that have opened? So we're talking about protection for people. And I don't know, somewhere when I ran for office, someone said to me, you know what, Georgia, whatever you do, make sure your citizens feel safe and that your city is safe. And, here we are at the point of talking about safety. And I understand that we have a lot of departments that need a lot of things. But maybe this is the time we need us to hold off and give the police department what they need.
I'll have to agree with that.
Mr. Mayor, may I phrase it in a different fashion?
Yes.
Third time's the charm.
What is the maximum dollar amount you're willing to provide the staff for the purpose of police? And do you want us within that number to also take care of the court and the prosecution staffing requirements that will be affected by the police?
I couldn't, Mr. Cleveland, at this point, shoot out a number to you. I mean, that's kind of like, people throw out things to scare people, to say, oh, okay, we can't do that. I'm not ready to take that position. I'm ready to take the position, look at it, see what we can do. We know what the number we're going to be. If it means a delay in certain positions, or if there is a ripple, which I agree with you on that. I mean, I'm not denying that, Mr. Cleveland, that there isn't that possibility, but I am not willing to say, whoop, sorry, I'm afraid of that, stop, we're not going to do it. So I stand in the same position I came in on.
Mayor?
Yes.
I think we put this in so it turns into an action item, Steve, so that you can come back with some justification for where these police would go and how we would use them and the consequences of doing that, meaning the ripple effect. So I think if we could see that, that might help us a little more. And we do understand what Larry's talking about when he says he needs to know if that bottom line is going to work no matter what. I think we've got that part, but there's this fine line there that Councilman Lord is concerned about, and I think the rest of us join in that, because safety came from the safety committee. Why have one if we're not going to listen to them?
Mr. Mayor, Councilwoman Holland, thank you for the clarification, and the point was, if we come back and say, in addition to the 5 officers, we need a person in prosecution, a person in courts, then that's the consequences that we can bring back to you, and we can bring you a financial plan on how to achieve that.
And, yeah, there are consequences for all our actions, and if that's it, then we'll have to figure that out.
I think the other consequences are worse.
I agree.
If we don't have those.
I got it. As I'm observing the conversation here, I'd rather have a backlog in the court than the property crime not being pursued.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, sorry, Rorik, to your staff, but I mean, I think I'd
Not
rather
his
have.
staff.
Well, yeah, no, it's his
Board
staff.
system.
No, but prosecution's
Yeah.
his staff. I mean, I'd rather have a stack, and Jeff, I'd rather have a stack of paperwork sitting on your desk and a stack of paperwork sitting on Rorik's desk than not have the property crimes investigated, if that's what we're talking
But-
about with those
but-
5 individuals.
But Mayor, but one of the things that you might do in the planning of this, as you say, okay, we will do this many this year, we will do this many the next year, and you still get what you want. It might take you 9 months longer to produce that, but you still get what you want. And that way, the number on our bottom line is not affected nearly so much. It's just spreading it out. It's doing a little bit more planning there.
Mayor, the other thing, sorry to do this, the other thing is, I can't imagine the court positions take the time to bring someone on as the police department does. I mean, if you're going to hire someone in the court, it isn't 8 months out, or it doesn't take 8 months to train them, it takes 9 months to train them.
They have to have a lot of the same background. Well,
I think with that direction, we'll set a target to bring back the tentative budget to you that reflects 5 officers with impacts for the court and prosecution built into the budget. What we'll do is I'm going to try to see, because of the one-time costs and the other variables, if we can keep that within the parameters of what the 6 officers would have been, including their equipment. And we'll report back to you either way how that's presented in the tentative budget. So if the city council doesn't like that product or that final outcome, you're able to adjust it at that point.
Yeah, and Mayor, I will not be here on the 29th of March, so that's, I mean, so that's, I'm concerned to know the information before that.
You'll have to, can you do that? You can get it out early, can't you, by email
We'll get it out
on
early.
those particular positions?
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Well, I'd like to see, in addition to that, I'd like to see rationale for those additional police and how they're going to be used, so that we see that next July, a year from now, we actually see that many more policemen on the street, and how that impacts property crimes. Mostly that's what we have here, right? And how that impacts that. Is there some way to put that together so we can see a rationale for how that will impact the officer on the street? Because I'd like to see that. And not only that, with the court dates and all that, and the overtime and all that.
I think it's part of the action item.
Well, and I want to make sure that's
Mr.
included.
Cleveland.
But the rationale I want to see with that.
I've got it written down.
Okay.
Does that include the anticipated reduction in crime rate? Is that a projection? I assume we can do it.
Well, Mr. Mayor, as the chief had previously stated, these bodies basically will not be on board until next July to impact crime at all.
Right.
And therefore, it will be the data a year later,
Correct.
in the year 2009, that will really give us evidence that there has been a benefit.
Correct.
So the projection for 2009 is?
Well, Mayor Kavanaugh, we can look at projections based on calls for service trending, and we've been pretty close. We've been within a couple thousand in annual calls for service. So we're looking at, by 2009, probably having close to 85,000 calls for service. So we could look at that as a target or an anticipated number for where we'd be, and then we can show actuals with that. But there are also some variables, though, too. We'll still be a growing city, and it's important to remember, too, that over 70% of the people we arrest are non-residents, and over 70% of the people we give citations to are non-residents. So of those, we have those kinds of variables in there, too, from projection standpoints.
Mr. Mayor, one of the targets that we have is to actually increase the available time for all the officers. Hopefully, we will be able to measure some of that during the course of this next year through a change in practices, et cetera.
And that's a
And I think maybe that's where the vice mayor's going.
yes, that's part of it. Yeah, absolutely.
Mayor, we're talking about the 2.4 million, the matrix implementation. I think that's probably where you all are looking. But did we have a similar fund in your office last year? Did we have a similar working pot of money in the management office?
No, we didn't. As we were balancing this year's budget, the issue that became obvious to us is we saw the matrix assessment coming, but not knowing what was going to be in there, we knew we had to put money in, and that was the whole logic.
Remind me again how we arrived at the 2.4.
We started at $1.5 million, and then it was fairly arbitrary. It was not scientific because we really didn't. We got, as departments, we got the draft Phase 2 report from Matrix the day I presented the budget to you. So it really wasn't as scientific based on that analysis.
You know, all your directors now have read that thing, and most of this stuff is process-oriented, it seems to me, not necessarily cash-oriented, dollar-oriented. So it would make sense to take it, you know, out of there. I mean, if we need another prosecutor, we need another prosecutor based on that. I think, given that thought, you know, I'd look at a 2.4 and figure out, I mean, don't take it all away, because I think you want some of that sitting there, and it may be for other special projects beyond just Matrix that you have in mind. But, you know, if you need to go to 1.1 or 1.2 in order to make sure that we can accommodate the caseload that's going to be created, I'm with Georgia in the same sense. I'm not necessarily willing to identify a number tonight for you, but look at that 2.4 and allocate that appropriately in what you see fit based on our discussion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman Antoniak, the other portion of the 2.4 was basically earmarked for advancing some of the technology changes in the process, and my recollection was that at least to subscribe potentially up to $1 million, and that would have to be phased in, obviously, once we get inside those numbers. From the Matrix report, we do not have it.
Right. And when we get into the specifics of that, I would venture to guess, based on my reading, that maybe it's good to have the money there to be able to implement it, because I think we're going to probably talk about that. But at the same time, I think there's probably some reprioritization and reallocation of funds throughout the city.
There was.
So.
And there was positions, too.
And,
Right, no, but I'm
and we'll be able to begin to do that once we see the final report that is a consolidation of all the departments' inputs, which hopefully we'll see in the next 30 days, so that we can actually go through that formal process of looking at its real impacts on all the departments. How we can reuse our money or reshape our money.
Okay, I think we don't have time for you, Ken. All right, well, we'll bring you back as soon as we can. Thank you, Larry. We'll meet at 6 p.m. This meeting's adjourned.